Hello and welcome to the Decryptid Podcast. This is a podcast where we will discuss everything from ghosts and ghouls, sightings and abductions, the weird and unexplained, along with plenty of normal stuff too. So get comfortable, pour your favorite drink, and get ready to get weird. Sitting across the state line from me through the power of the internet is, as always, my co-host Justin, and I'm your other co-host, Seth. Welcome to episode 1, titled Weird Wisconsin. That's right, folks. They aren't just famous for cheese and lenient strip clubs. So if you're ready, we're ready. Let's do it. Justin, take it away.
Hey, man. I thank you very much for the intro. I do want to clarify one thing. Our episode is not Weird Wisconsin. That is a book published and furnished out by a credible book company, I'm sure. We are Wisconsin the Weird.
Off to a great start.
Great start. Episode 1 in the fucking books. So, what are we about here? Intro to the podcast, kind of what we do here. I think you kind of said it best. I think Seth perfectly lined that up, so we're going to go ahead and skip that part of the outline straight away. Topics covered, straight away skipping it again. Phenomenal intro, by the way. I know that just worked on it. And what kind of research are we going to do for this podcast? I think one of the best things to discuss here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we're going to try to bring you as close to factual information as possible. We're covering...
I think that we're gonna find topics that we're interested in. We're gonna go on the internet. We're gonna try to find the most reliable sources for the information that we bring to the podcast, and then we're just gonna talk about it because talking about this stuff is fun. Neither of us are blind believers on these kind of things. On some topics, maybe a little bit more so than others, but for the most part, we just like talking about it. So yeah, and that's what we're going to bring to you. We're not experts. We just like talking about this stuff, so that's what we're going to do.
I think the term expert on this in such an ambiguous topic is such a bizarre claim to fame. You know, how is any one person a Bigfoot expert, a Sasquatch expert, a ghost hunting expert? You know,
I think that if you claim to be an expert on any one of those things, it eliminates your ability to be an expert on anything else in the world.
I think, yes. I think credibility is immediately flushed down the drain. Phenomenal. Absolutely. So just some backgrounds on some information about myself. I got this idea. I don't even know how to begin the story. I won't go into my detailed sighting. But one time on a drive down to Southern Illinois University, alma mater of Seth and almost myself, I was this close, man. You can't see me, but I'm holding my fingers really close. This close to getting into the university, and then I just didn't. So, but... I had a sighting, something weird, something bizarre, and we can go into it maybe at a later episode. But I think just
we will go into this, maybe even this episode, because this isn't just a weird story as much as it's a hilarious story. So we are going to touch on it.
I don't really know how hilarious it is. I think the hilarious part came from the people I told, as you all laughed at me and guaranteed claimed I was stoned.
Well, yes, that is why it was funny.
And listen, there's no chance that I wasn't.
For you, right. It seems terrifying. For us, hilarious.
God. We should just end the podcast now. I'm so embarrassed with myself. So yeah, that's just kind of what I've seen. I did have a recent UFO sighting that I actually sent to Seth, which is pretty cool. And we can put that up on the Twitter. Actually, it's already on the Twitter if you want to go check that out. And we'll plug all that shit at the end. But yeah, why don't you... so my level of belief, substantially, I would say more than Seth's. And that's kind of one of the best parts in after being, beyond being rather longtime friends, it was important to me that I bring somebody on the cast who was going to kind of check me on some of that shit, before I kind of go farther off the deep end than we really need to go. So, as far as how much I believe, it's a lot. Okay. I'm willing to hear anything basically at this point in my life. But again, I think having a co-host who's kind of more middle grounded on this kind of issue is really going to harness the potential of what this podcast can be.
Yeah, I think that as we talk about more of the topics that we're planning on getting into, our particular levels of belief are going to be exposed here. I don't like to consider myself a skeptic. I love hearing about stuff like this. It fascinates me. The same way that I'm fascinated by what I know to be fiction. I just assume most of this to be, but I don't know, and I'm not claiming that I know. So for the most part, I'm very agnostic towards the idea of some of this stuff being real or legitimate. Some of it I think is complete bullshittery. Some of it I think is very much odd, unexplained, and a lot of questions are left to be answered. So regardless of the fact that I don't consider myself an enthusiast, I do love talking about it. And so I think it makes for a pretty good dynamic because, like I said, Justin across the table from me here, he'll believe anything.
It's true. It's true. I believed in the literal boogeyman. I mean, until I was like 22 years old. So there were monsters under my bed for sure when I was in high school.
I thought the term human being was human being until I was about 14.
You know what? I can attest to that because I think one time in a conversation you were like, "I'm just a human being," and then quizzical looks around the room from everybody. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you know what? Also, I was watching the Cosby Show of all things,
God.
and I heard him very clearly say, "Like you are a human being." I don't do impersonations. That was more.
That was terrible.
A terrible Morgan Freeman than it was a Bill Cosby. But anyhow, I was a post-pubescent teenager and heard that, clarified with my mom, and here we are. Now I'm 33, and I know that it's human being. So,
well, it took 14 years, but I'm glad you got your shit together.
Yeah, 14 years. That's not good. You're not good at math.
No, I'm not. Have you ever seen anything, Seth? Have you ever seen anything strange or unusual? Anything maybe unexplained?
That's a great question. Actually, I have. I have seen something very weird and unexplained.
By the way, this is going to be news to me. Okay.
Yeah.
We've been friends for how long? 20 plus years?
Yeah. 20,
never knew. I'm excited to hear it. Let's go.
Yeah. The reason that I don't think you had ever heard about it, maybe I had mentioned it to you back in the day, but it didn't have any profound effect on me whatsoever. It was very, very odd. It was something that I thought about a lot for a little while and then went on with my life. So I was walking my dog, Justin. I was walking Bailey, and I had walked down Golf Street, and I was.
Can I just interrupt you? Did she have a shoe in her mouth?
Not on this walk. She had left them in the front hall.
Bailey loved her shoes.
Yeah, she'd pick up a shoe, she'd bring it to you, and then she'd stick her ears back and wag her tail. And she was just the most wonderful yellow lab. Rest in peace, Bailey. She lived to be 14 years old. So I was walking down golf, past the little par 3 golf course there, and I was next to the pond. And I was in that field where, if you look to the right, it would be John's house, right? John Blazer, no last names, John's house, right?
We'll get used to this. Don't worry. Still episode 1.
And I was standing there with the dog, and she was sniffing around doing whatever, and she perked up and she looked across the pond and looked over. So it would be, and I know for the listeners to this is going to be much more difficult to visualize than it will be for Justin. Justin's familiar with this area, but she looked over what is the most south end of the pond across the golf course into the woods, and there are some thick woods in that area of the golf course that crosses the Des Plaines River and then goes on for maybe a half a mile until you get to a residential area. So it's not some vast wilderness by any means, but it is a patch of forest. I'm sure that there are coyotes, deer, anything, and when I was younger, we used to go into the woods and stuff, and we used to make forts. And so it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that there could be a space there that would be thought of to be semi-private, where you could, have fun, go out, camp out, do whatever. Okay. Bailey perked up and looked over there, and in slow succession, I would estimate anywhere from 8 to 12 lights turned on from deep inside the woods, and it looked like it was just pitch black, but all I could see was the light, so I couldn't see any figures or anything. I mean, this was probably 3/4 of a mile away from where I was standing, but one by one lights came on, and I would say 8 to 12 lights in what I would venture to guess maybe a 20-foot diameter. Like maybe it was
off
a circle.
The ground? Are these how far off the ground?
No. This is in the woods. This is on the ground. So if this was if this was something, this was like a group of people doing something weird.
By lantern, or what do they call it?
Yes.
By oil light.
Yes,
right?
and I mean,
Okay.
if you were in there, because like, so if there were lights set up, like if people were camping, like that would have already penetrated through. So it was a pitch black forest. These lights came on in succession. The thing that really weirded me out about it is that my dog froze and she stared at it, and I just stared at it too. And they came on, and then.
Do they come on simultaneously, or are these all kind of individual kind of pop-ups?
No, it was like a soft yellow light, circular lights one by one. You know, just like a lantern would look, like nothing out of the ordinary as far as the lights. Okay.
Orbish in nature.
Yeah, I would say orbish in nature.
All right. Let me press the light. Let me press the light vision further here. Now, a lot of people have claimed to see orbs in the woods, but there's a very specific detail that you are leaving out here. And I don't want to lead you on any of this. And the best part is I've known you for 20 plus years, so I think we can kind of go with this. But, you know, one of the things people describe is that these orbs have this light around them, and it's almost like the light is contained within the orb. So, you know, if you stare at a light from far away, there's kind of like an emitting light around
like an aura.
Light. Yeah, an aura, exactly, of the light around there. But people have claimed to see lights in the woods for years and years, hundreds of years, I would actually imagine.
Sure.
But the specifics that they all like to give is that there's no light emitting. It is almost like you are observing a light within a sphere. So no light emits outside of the sphere. Could you describe that at all or no?
I think that's fair. You know, one thing that I do want to stress is that, you know, at this time, I would imagine that I was 16 or 17 years old. It did unsettle me a little bit, but like I said, like this didn't have any like big effect on me. I wasn't like, I didn't walk away from this thinking that I had just seen something like, you know, supernatural or something. I thought that maybe there was a group of lunatics in the woods, that were doing something. I mean, like, you know, this
Very
was
plausible. Very plausible.
You know, this was the early 2000s, you know, like.
So how old are you now? How old are you, do you think you are?
I would say I was 16, maybe 16, 15, 16 or 17.
Did you own the big blue caddy? That's really the only question we need to know here.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if at this time I owned the blue Cadillac. I got a blue Cadillac when I was 16 years old. I'm not sure if I'd gotten that yet.
Baby,
you know,
baby blue.
Baby blue. It's a 1994 baby blue Cadillac DeVille.
Gorgeous car. Absolutely. You could live in the back seat for weeks on end and never see your neighbor in the front seat.
That's true. I do want to stress that in the early 2000s, the early aughts, the early aughts, the aughts, 2000.
What is aughts? What does aughts stand for?
You ought to know, and I don't.
Okay.
And I don't have the answer to it. But so I want to stress that this was a period of heightened clickiness. Okay, so there were established groups among children and, you know, teenagers, and so one of them, and I don't know, you know, I'm removed from that now. I don't know if it's still as prevalent as it was back then, but goth kids were a big deal back then.
Oh man, the goths, dude. Paint your nails black. You ever paint your nails black?
My toes are currently black.
God,
that is not a joke. I got a pedicure with my mom and my wife. So
I think she's legally your wife.
You should keep that down. Jesus Christ. Great. Now my mom can't listen to this. You told someone?
Listen, Sue, if you ever listen to this, just know that I love you with the bottom of my heart. And
now Emily can't listen to this either. She's like, this is because now if her mom listens to this, which
our wives were never going to listen to this.
Her mom would never listen to it in a million years. But anyhow, okay, let's finish the story.
You digress.
So, yes, from what I recall, it didn't seem like there was like much light emitting from those lights, but that's just from the image that I have in my head. I'm not claiming that it was an unnatural light. I think it very well. It could have been it could have been a series of citronella candles. It really could have. I don't think that it. Because
was there pulsating? I mean,
no, not really.
Is it just one solid light?
No, So if what it looked like to me is if you can imagine a circular, like a soft yellow light, not like a bright white light, but like a soft yellow circular light bulb is the type of light, but clearly bright enough for me to see very clearly, and, you know, to oddly spook my dog. Okay, so I stood there. I wasn't terrified. It wasn't one of those things where I was like, as soon as it happened, I felt like I was connected to something bigger than myself. It was nothing like that. I stood there. I was right next to my dog. I watched it. I watched the lights come on in succession. Like I said, 8 or 12 lights that looked from my angle to be a straight line, but very well could have been like, if people were standing in a circle or something like that, that's what it could have been. And then as soon as that last light came on, everything stayed illuminated for 10 to 30 seconds. I'm not exactly sure. And then that first light that came on turned off, and then they were all off. And I looked at my dog and I said, Bailey, that's enough walking for us tonight. Let's get on home. Because, it was dark. It was probably 9 p.m. This was either in the, I want to say it was probably the late summer. I want to say it was probably maybe September or early October, because I know that I would typically walk my dog around 8:30, 9 o'clock, which in the summer we'd still have some daylight. It was pitch black. I know it was pitch black. And then I went home, and that was my thing. Like I said, I thought about that quite a bit for a little while, but then, life goes on. I never, like I said, it didn't affect me very much. I wasn't terrified by it. I wasn't like awe-inspired by it. I kind of just made the assumption right away that like, yeah, it's entirely possible that there's a group of fucking lunatics in the woods that are doing something stupid. And that was my weird sighting. And that's
I think I do remember you telling me something like this.
I'm sure I told you. I
think it was long. And I think it's before. Before this was even a poop stain in the ideas of doing a podcast. So I think I remember. Now I need to ask a
podcast didn't exist back then.
Maybe that was more of a blog era. Remember people blogged all the time in the early 2000s? I have a blog.
This was very much before blogging became prevalent. This was, in 2000. I think that you are miscalculating a little bit. I mean, even blogging. I mean, like this was.
People have been blogging since the 90s.
I mean,
AOL was full of them. You've gone in a chat room.
This was like the
ASL.
Of if you had a website, there's a good chance it was hosted by Angel Fire.
Got it. Angel Fire. Jesus. All right. Now that you know how we're all old, I need to ask what I could consider to be the most pertinent question. Pertinent.
Shoot.
Were you high on marijuana?
I would guess that I was not high on marijuana at 15 or so.
Probably a school night.
Yeah. Probably was not high on marijuana.
That's good. Okay. Well, it's a phenomenal story. That's a phenomenal story. I'm glad that you shared that. Yeah. It was unscripted, ladies and gentlemen. I think that was a phenomenal way. Do I just go into my sightings now that we're into this?
Well, I mean, how much time we got here?
I think if we press more than an hour and a half, we're good. We're about 20 minutes in. 18 minutes is by my recording. So you let me know how you feel about it. I can wrap mine in about 7 minutes, but if you have questions or thoughts, or if you have questions or thoughts, it helps.
You do your thing.
My thing. All right, let's just do it. Yeah, let's talk about kind of. Now, I guess you could say that. I mean, aliens in my life have been all the whole time. I got about 8 of them tattooed to my skin. It goes back to watching my first episode of the X-Files when I was about 11 years old, 12 years old. I just became absolutely, utterly fascinated. But I guess I would never have lended credence to the idea of Bigfoot other than that I guess I was open to believing it. And let me just start off first and foremost by saying I would, if I was going to give you a credible Bigfoot story, I don't think this is it. But I think the best that I can give you is that this is a cryptid of some kind. So,
wait, sorry, Justin. Before you go into this, can you define what a cryptid is? Because I just found out the definition of that word 2 hours ago.
2 hours ago. So a cryptid is more or less, like, God, we're gonna get grilled to shit if this actually makes the air. A cryptid is a mythological being, but moreover, an animal of blood, of physical. It's a physical being that is either yet to be discovered or has not been discovered, which those are both redundant statements. But, some really famous cryptids, which have come to life, are manatees. That's a very famous, the Chinese carp was a cryptid at one time. So, I mean, if you look at the long history of things that have made the cryptid list studied by cryptozoologists. I mean, there have been some actual legitimate claims that have come out of this. Now, I think certainly the most famous is Bigfoot, right? Sasquatch, Yeren, Yeti, Yowie, however you want to call it, from whatever country you're in. Certainly the most talked about, probably the most covered. Then you have your Loch Ness Monster. You have mermaids that are ended up cryptid. So stuff like that. If I'm not giving it enough justice here, please do interrupt.
Sure. So I think you covered the bases pretty good there. So what I found here with the help of Google. What is cryptozoology, the study of? It says cryptozoology is a pseudoscience and subculture that aims to prove the existence of entities from the folklore record, such as Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, or Mokalembembe. Cryptozoologists refer to these entities as cryptids, a term coined by subculture. So, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
I like it. So we would go into the assumption that if you are listening to the Decryptid podcast, what is it? What did we used to call it?
It did start the Encrypted podcast until we found out that there was a 9-book fictional fantasy series with a small but loyal following of the same name. So that put an end to that.
Yeah, we didn't want to get sued.
No, I didn't want to get sued.
God, it would have been so good if we had not gotten sued too. That's good. We did.
We did the right thing. When you sent me the name, I didn't think it had any meaning other than the fact that, hey, that's a cool word. So
yeah, well,
that's just a little backstory. That's a little backstory on how much of a quote unquote enthusiast I am of this stuff. Is I didn't know what any of this meant.
which is another reason, by the way, that I decided to invite him onto this because, I guess you could call this my brainchild, right? Before anything else.
Oh, sure.
I threw out the idea and he was in, and I think we just kind of went from there. So now that we're both totally full of shit, let's get back to my sighting here. So both Seth and I believe it was Seth who actually talked me into this, we both lived in Carbondale, Illinois, which is about 6 hours south of Chicago, right there, about 45 minutes from the Kentucky border. Very beautiful area, a very underrated part of the state. When you think of Illinois, I'm positive you think of cornfields, what do they call it? Summer or winter wheat fields, soy fields, just flat, unattractive land. But once I think you get about 4 hours south of Chicago, I mean, boy, does it just blow up into some pretty gorgeous stuff. So if you're familiar at all with state parks, there is the Garden of the Gods State Park down there, and then you have the what is the forest? Giant City, yes.
Giant City, and then it's called Shawnee National Forest.
The Shawnee National Forest, which is a very large, if I'm not mistaken, area of forestry.
It's huge. It's huge.
It really searches from about Oklahoma, I think, is kind of where it starts unofficially. And it really goes almost all the way east to Georgia. So you have some really gorgeous land and territory in there, through Kentucky, through Tennessee, all the way to the Appalachia, But yeah, really just not enough great things to say about the region. So,
but it is too damn hot.
It's so hot. What do you have down there? You have the Mississippi, the Illinois, the Missouri, the Ohio.
Lots of big rivers.
Just a bunch of rivers, all converging onto the Mississippi. The area is a goddamn swamp.
I'm sure there are some cryptids swimming around in those waters.
Hey, the Big Muddy Monster from Murfreesboro, man. Very famous in the area. Very famous. And you know what? I'm sure on a later podcast we could probably touch base on something like that. So
I mean, I'm gonna fish for it.
There he is. I don't think it's a water-dwelling being. It kind of more resembles a upright walking hominid, but better known as Bigfoot.
Hey, man, if it eats, I'll catch it with a hook.
Okay. Are you using a spinner bait?
Am I using a spinner bait?
Just one. Yeah, just one that is entered plural in the end.
It depends. It depends the time of year. It depends the time of day.
Diamond jig. Diamond jig, right?
Diamond jig.
That would be a.
It depends what the weather conditions are that day. I'm not sure that my first choice in tackle to catch a bipedal hominid would be a spinner baits, but what makes a good angler is that they're open to using what they need to use on that day to get bit.
If you were to gauge how far off topic we've gotten, what would be like on a 1 to 10 level? 1 being we're right there, 10 being we're in Narnia here. What do you?
I'm not going to give us a 10 because as the listeners of this show will eventually realize, when I tangent off to something else, it will mostly be fishing related. When we get into our background a little bit, you guys will learn more about why that is. So I'd put us at a 4. I'm sure that there are going to be times where
I'm going at like a 7. I feel like we're out of here. So let's bring it back in here a little bit, okay? We're gonna get through my sighting, and then we're gonna call this Wisconsin the Weird Part 1, because I think what we're only going to be able to cover within our time frame here is the Hodag and what my favorite Wisconsin cryptid, the Beast of Bray Road. So we'll cover that, and then we'll maybe get on a more serious chapter in Wisconsin the Weird Part 2, which could be our next episode, and we'll start talking about a little bit more on the ground, a little bit more scary, perhaps a little bit more heavy stuff, the Jeffrey Dahmers, the Ed Geins, and then a lot of Satanism and the occult, which is very famous in the area.
And those guys, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ed Gein, those guys, as Norm Macdonald would say, those guys are real jerks.
Yeah, I would say definitely jerks.
Yeah, I mean those guys are jerks. But okay,
so let's get back in it. We're gonna Jesus Christ, we've been talking for 26 minutes about nothing. This is like, can I say Seinfeld? Can we say we're kind of like Seinfeld? So far the show has been about literally nothing.
I mean, if you want us to fail, sure.
Oh God, or get sued. All right, we love you, Seinfeld creators, Larry David. Don't sue me. But we're gonna get back into.
I'm sure they're listening.
They're definitely going to fucking come across us at one point. Okay, so we're gonna get back really quick here. So back on this tangent, we did Seth specifically attended Southern Illinois University. It was located in Carbondale, which I ended up going down and residing for about 7 years, doing officially nothing with my life outside of partying and enjoying the college experience without, in fact, going to college. So that was really fun for me. But on one of my regular trips home back to the Chicagoland area, which is where at the time I was living, I was on my way back to school-ish. I think we always kind of refer it back to school, but it's back to Carbondale for me. And it was pretty late at night. Definitely, I would say north of midnight. That's for sure. And
this was not out of the ordinary for us to drive late in the evening.
Yeah, we were in our 20s. I'd leave at 3 a.m. It's a 6-hour drive. No problem.
In the dozens and dozens and dozens of times that all of us made the drive back and forth from Carbondale, I'm sure that at some point we were driving that drive every hour of the day. So there was never, there were. I would
say 75% of the time I left for the drive, it was after 3 to 4 p.m.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So it was dark most of the time. I want to say it was summer. It was definitely nice. There was green on the trees. And I am traveling southbound on Highway 57, and I am just north of Rend Lake. So I'm not sure if it's a very big lake in the area, Rend Lake, Rend Lake. And I'm driving, and I'm in the left lane. I'm doing 75, probably 80 miles an hour, as normal people would go on the interstate. And I start seeing what I can literally only describe to you as white hair blowing across the interstate, seemingly like tumbleweeds. And I mean, it was kind of notably everywhere. Now, if you're kind of from the Midwest, we get these cottonwood trees up here, and in the springtime and in the early summer, they bloom. And I mean, they're just everywhere. It just blows in the air. You got to get them cleared out of your vents. It's such a nightmare if you kind of live in this area. And that was kind of what I thought. I said, Jesus, look at this cottonwood. It's everywhere. The next thing I know is I see a blood spatter on the concrete, which it's probably the size of my vehicle in total. Like, it's a very massive, massive blood splatter. What I assume would be any deer. And you pulverize a deer going 60 miles an hour in an 18-wheel truck, that thing is going to be looking pretty horrible, right?
Yeah. And the listeners probably have seen this before. I mean, this is standard stuff. When you're on a rural highway, this is the type of stuff you see quite a bit, because these deer get hit from a car or a semi going 70, 75, 80 miles an hour, and that's what you got.
That's what you get. Absolutely.
Nothing out of the ordinary yet.
So definitely still on the very straight and narrow here as far as opinions go. And then I see a vehicle pulled to the side. And this is an 18-wheeler, lights on. Now, again, you have to understand here, this is taking place in a matter of about 17 seconds. So as I'm dragging the story out, just remember that I'm still going 75 miles an hour down the interstate. This all happens within about 50 to 100 yards, I would say, give or take, maybe faster. I don't really know math or the speed of vehicles and which distance is covered. But now I see this vehicle, and then I would say seconds later, what I can only describe, and this is where I failed to tell the story to my friends. Listen, the greatest cartoon ever made, what is it?
Bugs Bunny?
God, I hate you. Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, shit.
Okay? It's the greatest cartoon ever made. If you haven't seen it, seen it. Now, I reference that because what I can tell you is the only thing I can possibly describe in my brain that I'm seeing. And now your brain, and you can attest to this, and plenty of educational studies can attest to this. Your brain, once having seen something, is kind of like a filing cabinet. It kind of puts it away and says the next time you see something that looks like that, your brain is going to associate it with that. What I can only describe to you as Appa, the flying buffalo. What is his name? He's not a buffalo.
He's a bison.
Sky bison. Yeah.
Sky bison.
Jesus. We're going to get so many emails. The flying sky bison with its ass end to me in the ditch of the car about 15 feet to my right, absolutely running at the speed of my vehicle. And I'm telling you, and I say that because what I think I saw was it's basically its hind legs, its hindquarters kind of running throughout and moving. And like I said, I'm by just north of Wren Lake, and it does end up dipping off, kind of going down into a ditch area and then into the lake. And this thing kept pace with my vehicle for all of about 5 seconds. Now, if you want to count yourself to 5 here, really quick, we're not going to do that, but that's a fairly legitimate enough time to see something and try to associate it with something else. And I'm telling you, that was the best thing I could come up. This thing had to be, in my opinion, now this is still working on 10, 12 years ago, was the size of a school bus. It was absolutely enormous. And I think when I told you guys this story, it was the best way to describe it. And then the only other way I could really describe it was like, if you'd ever seen a garbage bag filled with air kind of just rolling down the road, or a plastic bag, like in some way. It was just, it had this giant motion to it that I was indescribable to me. But what I'm telling you is that I saw fur. I saw fur on the road, and I saw fur on this animal, but it was white. It was absolutely snow white, within so much contrast of the ditch and the greenery in the area.
So, when you told the story, when I mentioned earlier in the podcast that this really made us laugh, and it made me laugh in particular, was when I started suggesting to you what you had seen. I was like, come on, man. What you saw was just a big dog. And you went, no, it wasn't a big dog.
It wasn't a goddamn dog, okay?
And I said, well, you know what? You're in the middle of Illinois. Plenty of horses around. What you saw was a white horse. And you said, no, it was not a horse. And I said, so what you're saying is you saw a polar bear.
And I think that if you're going to call it something physical and known, yes, it was like the 8th episode of Lost, the most unexplainable thing, the polar bear in the tropics of Hawaii. That's the kind of thing that I saw. Absolutely. And it was absolutely, hands down, the strangest thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And it's still with me to this day. And I shit you not, if I close my eyes and reenact the scenario, I can still see this thing, or what I think I saw, running down the side of the roads. Now, I am not going to call this thing Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and mostly because, and I'll tell you this from listening to witness stories for at least the last several years, is that no Sasquatch or Bigfoot, certainly in the Midwest, has ever been really described as white. Some grays in there, but I mean, if you're going to call it something, it just didn't, that wasn't my first thought. I wasn't like, I just saw Bigfoot. I just saw Sasquatch. I thought I saw Appa from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I think to this day, it was the most regrettable description of anything I'd ever seen in my entire life.
Now, Appa from The Last Airbender has 6 legs and a big flat beaver tail. So this didn't have that. This was
It did not have the flat beaver tail.
right. It basically looked like you were looking at the ass end of a giant, like cartoonishly giant polar bear. If that's the most
I would say that, and I think I remember saying that. I think I remember the conversation with you and I where I think you were almost verbatim retelling what you were saying. I think that is very legitimately what I thought I saw was a fucking, and I know how big a polar bear is. Okay. I do have context to how big a polar bear is next to me. I have gone to the zoo. Okay. But when I laid out, and this thing was very literally the size of a goddamn bus, it was the size of so basically now I'm past this thing. I'm 150, 200 yards past this thing. 10 seconds or so have gone by. And the only thing I can think of is that this semi must have literally collided with this thing. Because I didn't get a look at the semi front end or not. It could have had a flat tire. That might have been on the side of the road, But that was the first instinct in my head. And that this thing had just basically rolled it off. Now, that's not unheard of in the sense that real animals have been hit by vehicles going pretty fast and just kind of gotten up and ran away. There are stories of deer getting hit by vehicles and just kind of brushing it off and running away. Now, do they die eventually with internal injuries? Perhaps, but
my wife and I hit a deer in New Jersey and hit it dead square on in a white van. We were only going probably we were just accelerating when it ran across the road, but we hit it dead on. It bounced about 5 feet, landed on its side, popped up, looked completely fine, ran into the woods.
Man, that is not the deer hitting story that I had either. I hit a deer once, and it was hilarious in the sense of terrifying. It was a small doe, and I was delivering pizzas, and I hit this thing square on its face, hit my headlight, and this thing slid across the ground 150 to 100 yards like it was on ice, and it was on solid concrete. And that thing, I made sure, I did the humane thing. I made sure it wasn't breathing before I drove away. But yeah, you're right. It got up. You're on your story. You're telling me it got up and it popped right back in the woods, right?
Yep.
Oh. I mean, that's how you hit a deer, I guess, right? If there's any good way to hit it.
Yeah, there's an art to it.
Okay, so now let's get started on our first cryptid, our first Wisconsin the Weird topic, and we're talking about the Hodag. The Hodag, Hodag. Now, what did you call it before we got on the script?
I called it the Hobag because I'm not above picking at low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe physically. Sometimes,
I don't know if I get that joke.
You never heard the term low hanging fruit before? Let's move on.
Let's do it. Let's quickly let's get into the script. Okay. So our first topic in one of Wisconsin's well-known cryptids, the Hodag, comes from the land up north. And now, if you're from Wisconsin, it's pronounced up north. All right. Deep north. In the heart, up north. Yeah, you like that? All right. Deep in the heart of Oneida County. So now it's aptly named as it is part of the territory once inhabited by the Oneida Indians, which is one of the 5 nations of the more popularly known Iroquois tribe. I learned that when I did my studies.
Hey.
So the Hodag itself was discovered near the town of Rhinelander. Now, the town of Rhinelander was, let's back this up a little bit. Now, the Hodag itself was discovered near the town of Rhinelander in 1893. Now, Rhinelander at the time was a central hub for lumberjacks working in the Northwoods territories of Wisconsin, or kind of the upper peninsula of Michigan at the time. And it's likely the first witnesses to the Hodag were local lumberjacks kind of working in that area. Now, the Hodag is described as a fearsome creature with red or green eyes, long tail.
Let me stop you here. Here's one thing that has always irked me about sightings of these cryptids is they're always described with red or green eyes. You know what has red or green eyes? Pretty much anything that's seen at night with a light.
Now, I will be the first to interject that you are incorrect. So now eyeshine is created by a certain reflective film that is found on. All right, now I don't want to say this factually, but I don't know what animals are found on, but that glow very in almost zero circumstances comes back on any known animal as red. Now, I think one of the only ones that we can describe that as a crocodile or maybe an alligator. But if you eye shine a deer, or if you shine a badger, or if you shine any other kind, that's going to come back as a more of a white or yellowish glow. Now, I think it does lend credence to maybe not believing in this, which I think is very important. Now, you can kind of say, okay, because now you have to understand too, a lot of cryptid Bigfoot sightings. A very popular theme is when it's seen at night, they see glowing red eyes. Now, you watched the documentary that we're going to base a lot of our knowledge off of, and the book by Linda Godfrey called The Bray Road Beast, and the movie of, I think the book was called The Beast of Bray Road, and the movie that we watched was called The Bray Road Beast.
The Bray Road Beast, I believe.
Good, yeah. What a fucking.
It's a 1 hour and 4 minute documentary on Amazon Prime. If you guys have Amazon Prime Video, go ahead and give it a watch.
Yeah, a good movie, and I appreciate you watching it. I know it might have been a little insufferable as we
I wouldn't call it insufferable, but a good movie is your review, not mine. But
good, I like it. But it is nonetheless a source of information, and we will cover the Beast of Bray Road here in a little bit. But let's get back to the Hodag here. Now, again, the Hodag is described as a fearsome creature with red or green eyes, long tail, spikes and horns that run the length of its back, and it actually has two larger horn-like objects that sit on top of its head and large canine-like fangs. Said to be able to tear the flesh from anything it devours with the utmost of ease. With the head of a frog and the grinning face of a giant elephant. Now, I can literally, if you told me this description, I can hear you laughing. If you told me this description, I would literally laugh in your face, just like we're doing. I don't know what a grinning elephant would look like.
No, I mean, is that just like is that like how? I don't even know. I don't even know what to say.
I've never even heard an elephant being described as grinning. I've seen the Jungle Book, okay, and I'm not talking about the live action. I'm talking about the cartoon, which I would assume would have more smiling elephants than a live action film. Wouldn't you say?
I mean, I saw the live action one more recently,
but
smiling at, yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, okay. I'm never gonna watch it again, but it wasn't. I don't feel like I wasted my time.
I like that. Okay. Well, yeah. Again, I'm not really sure, and I think you're in agreement. I don't have any idea what the grinning face of a giant elephant, but that is a quoted text, by the way. It has massive claws on each of its four legs, 4 to 5, kind of depending on who you talk to. And the Hodag was rumored to be about 7 feet long and about 2 to 3 feet high, 2 to 3 feet in height, weighing in at a healthy 200 pounds. So now, if you can imagine, this is the size of probably a healthy alligator. I think alligators probably get quite a bit larger, if I'm not mistaken, up to 12 feet, I believe. A big guy.
Yeah. Well, what struck me about that was 7 feet long, 2 to 3 feet high, 200 pounds. He needs to hit the gym.
Skinny. He's a skinny little boy.
Yeah, that is slight of stature.
I would agree. But again, we are talking quoted text here, in at a healthy 200 pounds.
Slight of stature, especially if you think that the head of a frog and a grinning elephant would probably weigh a lot, just because it's so stupid.
Certainly. Now you are freakishly tall, and people can't really see your face.
I wouldn't say freakishly. I mean, like
all right, you're just under freakishly tall. Right?
It's difficult for me to fit in most arcade driving games, but like I don't have to duck to go through doors.
And how tall are you?
I'm 6'4" tall.
Now you're 6'4" tall. Now you stand this creature on its end, no tail included, which would probably be 2/3 of its body length. And we're calling it, what do we say here?
7 feet.
7 feet. So maybe on his hind legs, he's probably 5 feet tall. Coming in at 200 pounds. It's pretty girthy, I guess.
He could be a thick boy.
But his tail is probably also quite a bit of the weight.
Right, and you can't forget about those spikes.
Those spikes have got to weigh thousands of pounds apiece. Okay, so descriptions are pretty open to the interpretation, and often kind of depending on amount of PBRs. Ooh, PBRs drank in a single. That's a Wisconsin reference, by the way.
Now, before you wrote that line, did you fact check when PBR was established?
Yes. Can I just tell you that the year 1893 was the year that PBR received its blue ribbon that it is famous for?
Wow. So they were probably drinking a ton of PBR.
I mean, they were probably only drinking PBR. They probably didn't have a lot of.
What with PBR was probably the expensive beer, and these are.
It was probably just Pabst at the time, right? I mean, it's the same
probably.
Year. We can't really cut, 1894 is maybe when they decided to say, now we're blue ribbon, because in 1894.
But if we're being honest, these morons were drinking swill.
I don't even know what that is.
Swill?
Sounds like lake water.
Well, I think you could probably argue that lake water would be superior. Get it? That was a pun.
Done. Great Lakes, Wisconsin, Lake Superior. I think we're going to digress on jokes for at least the rest of the episode. What do you think?
I mean, I'm not making any promises.
Are you just going to lend dad jokes the whole time?
You know, if not, what else?
All right. I guess, we're not a family-friendly podcast by any means, but we could probably turn up the dirtiness on the jokes other than dad jokes here.
All right.
Let's get back to it. So
now that I know I'm greenlit.
Go ahead.
I said, now that I know I'm greenlit. Anyhow, go ahead.
All right, we got it. So while the Hodag was often witnessed by residents and lumberjacks in the Rhinelander area, its real claim to fame came by the way of a man named Mr. Eugene Shepard, a fellow lumberjack and resort owner. Now, Mr. Eugene was said to be the person that was widely distribute the claims of sightings of the Hodag. So kind of the godfather of the Hodag sightings, you might say. Now, Eugene, might we say, was not really the most credible man of the North Woods. He was said to be, it was said that as a side job that Mr. Eugene would go around selling moss through the mail to unwitting consumers, perfumed moss. Again, you go back to things that I can't understand. Grinning elephant. I don't have any. What do you think perfumed moss would smell like?
A perfumed moss?
A very musky smell, I would assume, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the smell like
earthy?
You would want if you wanted to smell like a lumberjack, you would buy perfumed moss.
Yeah. Aromatic comes to mind.
Oh gosh, smells good. Absolutely, smells like what a man would smell like, right?
Maybe.
Maybe. So it's also reported that old Eugene wasn't great at paying his debts, and then when debt collectors would actually come calling to get the money they were owed, Eugene, in a stroke of his own brilliance, would shove a bar of soap in his mouth, lather up real good, and then scream wildly at them until they ran away. I assume fairly confused or pretty much convinced that he might be rabid.
Rabid with the ribbies.
Ribbies.
The ribbies.
So Eugene was known as a trickster and a swindler, to say the least. So that is our pretty much source for first known Hodag credible witnesses. Are you buying this at all yet? I'm hook, line, and sinker. It totally exists.
I'm not quite there. Eugene doesn't strike me as the most trustworthy fellow.
No. Eugene sounds like a total asshole.
But I am going to bring back the word swindler. Use that more often now because it's a fun
like
word.
That? Swindler is good. We sidebar really quick. We have a great friend named Chris, and we might have been partaking in the devil's lettuce one time when we were early teenagers, and we went to a grocery store, and as Seth will attest here, Chris liked his donuts. Chris liked donuts for some reason, didn't he? Like just sweets in general when we were younger. I guess I can't attest to this now, but he certainly really enjoyed his sweets. Let's put it. Yeah. And we were at a grocery store one day, and he had purchased a donut, and being in the condition that we were in, he wasn't paying attention very well. And the cashier kept trying to hand him his change. I don't know if you ever heard this. There's a great story. And it was with Dave. And we might change names later just to save face here. But basically, he's trying to be handed this change. This cashier is just desperately trying to get him out of the line because at this point, we have totally made asses out of ourselves in the grocery store. And he basically just grabs his donut and walks away. So I look at the cashier and I stick out my hand. I grab his change and we walk away. Now we're walking down the street and he finally starts realizing what the situation is. And he screams, "I've been swindled!" exclaiming that the cashier never gave him his change, to which we all laughed for about 45 minutes because that's when you do when you're a teenager, high on the weeds. And, I did eventually come clean and said that I had grabbed his change, but I just thought that was such a great story to share. Incredible scientist now, by the way.
Yeah, he's a scientist.
Not a joke, by the way. Yeah. So now Eugene would later go on to claim that he and a search party had gone out with the intention of killing the beast with, you guessed it, dynamite. Now, let's talk professional lives here for just a second. You work with hunters. Is that correct, people? I mean, people that are literally out in the woods. Is that correct?
No, I would say that's incorrect. I work with anglers, and I work with hunters? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
I have coworkers. Several of them are serious hunters. Yes.
Okay. Now, have they ever told you a story about when they were out hunting with dynamite?
They have not.
Explosives.
They have not.
It's a very interesting way to go about hunting anything, I would assume.
I'm sure to the man and woman actually in the office, they would like to, but
I think the idea is really fun. Like I can only just see myself like as a cartoon character, back at Looney Tunes days, just lighting the stick of dynamite and then throwing it and then sticking my fingers, index fingers into my ears.
And then,
that's kind of the picture. That
exactly. Cartoonishly turning your back, sticking your ass towards the would-be explosion, closing your eyes, scrunching your face, and jamming your finger in your ears.
And like the creature itself doesn't absolutely blow up. It just kind of turns into a black sooted character. Do you know what I mean?
And if it's a duck, the bill will spin around 3 to 4 times and then end up on the back of their head, necessitating them to slowly move it back to the front of their head.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a phenomenal way to put it. So his claim was that he came across the animal and blew it to Kingdom Come, returning only with its charred remains. Now, when they returned, Eugene and company decided to reenact the beast's demise in a picture that later became what is widely considered the most popular picture of the beast. And we will make sure to, when posting this to the Twitter, Instagram, Facebook account, we'll make sure to add this picture because I think it's a really funny picture. And again, widely considered the best and most popular picture of the beast description. Now, Eugene would later claim that capture of the elusive Hodag, he would later claim capture of the Hodag, citing that him and other lumberjacks and bear wrestlers. Now, I Googled bear wrestling, and that is a real thing. Can you guess what country bear wrestling is most famous in?
Russia.
Definitely. Nailed it on the head.
It's gonna be Russia.
Just, I'm going to wrestle this bear. It stands no chance for my muscular Russian body. I just kind of get that Dolph Lundgren feel to it. You know what I'm saying?
I sure do. And actually, the MMA fighter Khabib Nurmagomedov, the guy who is, I believe he's undefeated. He beat the hell out of Conor McGregor, probably coming up on almost a year ago now. When he was a child, there is footage of him wrestling a bear and winning handily.
Now, I will say that I did research bear wrestling a little bit more than what I would consider something I would normally research. Bear. It just struck me as a very interesting. Now, they do in most cases, and this is very sad, and fuck the Russians for this, and anyone who wrestles a bear, they do normally remove the claws, exhume the teeth, and clamp their jaws shut. So basically, the fucking guy's going to win every time.
So they're not wrestling a bear, they're wrestling a teddy bear.
Yes. I think that is a phenomenal way to put it. You guys have literally no balls. Wrestle a real bear in the woods, for God's sake.
Seriously.
Unbelievable. Okay. So it is said that when, so let's get back to where we were. He ends up capturing this creature, cornering it in the beast's cave where it lives, where it is said to live, and placing chloroform at the end of a long pole, and later overcoming this by basically bombing the cave with chloroform. He then decides he's going to keep this thing in his barn at home. Now, Eugene was not really shy about the art of selling the creature's lore. Now, as we've talked about before, loves the money, loves scamming them out as best he can.
And you can't blame a man for that.
You know what? You really can't. Certainly not in this day and age. But now this is 100 years ago. So 100 plus years ago.
130 years ago.
30 years ago? Yeah. Absolutely.
That's a lot of Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Probably the most Pabst Blue Ribbon. Now, it is said that when people would come asking to see this creature, Eugene would dress in his finest Sunday best and would retreat to the basement where he supposedly held the Hodag. I'm seeing conflicting reports. So he's in the basement, he's in the barn, but nonetheless, he would go wherever he housed the Hodag, and suddenly there'd be a loud commotion and sounds of snarling and growling would come from the basement, as well as Eugene shouting at the creature, "Stand back, creature, I've got you." Now, he would return to the main floor, clothes in tatters, and claim that the beast was unable to be seen that day due to its vile nature, claiming, "Today, the beast is angry." Now,
so the beast was angry, the beast was ornery.
I think if you're speaking pre-1900s about anything being angry, it is imperative that you use the word ornery.
Now, do you think that one of the main reasons that the beast was ornery is because he has all them teeth but no toothbrush to brush them with?
If we had a soundbite, that was where I would throw in the hi-hat. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is a Waterboy reference dating us back to, again, the early 2000s. We are middle-aged men.
That movie's timeless.
It's a great movie. You know what? He never gets the love he deserves, Adam Sandler, right?
Well, he's done enough to damage his reputation in the last few years. Certainly hasn't.
The Cobbler.
Damaged, certainly,
aren't you a huge fan of The Cobbler?
Wasn't aware that one existed. I know that he hasn't damaged his bank account.
Yeah, I think he makes money without even trying.
Yes.
So it was not long after that Eugene would take this show on the road because, God, I mean, if there's anything you can make money on, it is late 1800s carnival sideshows. Charging onlookers, I wish this was quoted, but I decided to quote this myself, 10 cents a gander. Now, the gander is my part, but the 10 cents is real. Now, I don't know. We should have busted out the old inflation calculator, but I wonder what that would be in today's money.
How much did he charge for a goose?
Ooh, so not really the whole gander, but just the singular goose. Another phenomenal dad joke coming from your direction. Are you okay out there?
I'm good. I don't think a gander is a part of a goose. I think that
is a several gooses, right?
No. A gander, I believe, is a male goose, where a goose is a female goose. And plural, there is no
geese.
I think it might just be goose.
I think it's geese.
I think it is geese.
I think it's geese. You're thinking of moose.
I am thinking of moose. But I thought that moose and goose and geese and meese. And the plural of moose would be meese if moose were fucking smaller.
I would agree. Now, you have a college degree, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the audience knew. Right. So, in dark tents, the creature would reside, hissing and moving to the dismay of onlookers. His sons, unfortunately, would be part to the trickery, often making it seem so that the monster would appear to be moving using nothing other than fishing lure and strings. The Hodag's demise, unfortunately, came sadly in the form of what I assume would be Major Florida's favorite part of this, real and credible science.
Do you realize that you just called me Major Floater and no one knows? I did.
Nobody knows what that means.
Justin just called me by my Xbox Live gamer tag. I just want
also known as his screen name. If I talked to him a few days ago.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, we are who we are.
We are who we are. So when the Smithsonian had finally gotten wind of the possible animal,
the Smithsonian, this went upstairs quick.
It went very. I mean, you got to understand. This is late 1800s. What's the Smithsonian actually doing?
Probably what many assume to be the most important work on the planet in 1893.
I guess that would probably be accurate. Yeah. I would say outside of the Louvre, the Smithsonian is probably at this time certainly one of the more credible museums. Considering the Museum of Alexandria had been burned down at least 13 times. So now, fitting this description, the Smithsonian decides we're sending people in to investigate this, especially certainly the
top men.
It's these boisterous claims from Mr. Eugene. And so, not swayed by Eugene's antics, these investigators determined to see the beast with their own eyes. And Eugene was then forced to admit that it had all been a hoax, that he had created the monster using wood and ox leather and strings to help it move. Now, listen, I just want to point something out. This doesn't sound like a lack of Eugene's trying, doesn't it?
No, it sounds like you put in a lot of effort. It also sounds like the inspiration for the movie The Village from M. Night Shyamalan. Spoilers.
No, you are hearing dead silence because of the utter disappointment I have for that movie and the disdain I have for basically every other M. Night Shyamalan creation outside of Signs and The Sixth Sense.
Signs was all right.
Signs had the ending was kind of cheesy, but it definitely had a great chilling factor. Obviously, we all know Sixth Sense, probably his only and best movie, I would say, that I would give any kind of credible credence to. But I see dead people. It's kind of overplayed and certainly 20 years old. So I don't know if we want to keep referencing Mr. Shyamalan. Now, again, you have created something. Now we're going to go back to, again, I really was fascinated by this, using wood and ox leather. Now, again, we're going to post a picture of it. And if you haven't already, I mean, you can literally just Google a picture of the Hodag. Have you done that yet?
I have not.
I think you should. I think you should. Now, there is a great, do it right now. So there is a great picture, an old timey photo of Eugene. You're probably looking at the picture we're talking about. Now, there's an old timey black and white photo with several lumberjacks and Mr. Shepherd standing over what would be live Hodag, and his son is kind of laying underneath it, kind of almost in jest of the creature as though it were attacking. Now, if you look at this thing, not only does it look outrageously fake to you, but now imagine 120 years ago seeing this thing. Now, do you think you'd find it as fake? I mean, say you would, because it looks like total horseshit, doesn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, the thing that's still blowing my mind is the face of a frog and a smiling elephant, and now I kind of see it.
Do you kind of see it? Exactly. I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah. So you kind of see this smiling elephant. I mean, its teeth are literally looks like it's encompassed with molars.
It looks like he just got out of the dentist. It looks like he's been living his best life, but caring for his teeth along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, like early whites.
He flosses for sure
daily. I would say daily.
Yeah, definitely.
So now
he uses those Crest white strips in the extra large size.
Man, that's got to be some big. This is it'd be a tarp in his mouth.
Yeah.
So now, if you're at home and you're listening to this and you haven't turned us off already, and God bless you for doing that, or Satan bless you. I mean, whatever you're into. Listen, you got to look at this picture. You're gonna know. I mean, literally, you're gonna know. I mean, I'm sure you just have to Google the word Hodag, and it's probably one of the first pictures that come up. I mean, Rhinelander is kind of, and in my opinion, a very wonderful and kind of almost romanticized the creature in a very great way. I believe your basketball team for their high school is called the Hodags. It's kind of their national mascot. Really taken on a kind of a life of its own with this creature. And I think really kind of have turned it into something a lot of fun, which was once literally an elaborate financial scheme orchestrated by a lumberjack of early Wisconsin pioneer days. So,
a swindling resort owning lumberjack.
I agree. And I mean, we're putting it very nicely. I admit not a lot of other things have nice things.
This guy was a dick.
It is kind of an asshole. Yeah. I would say that if it was 1893, you and I would not enjoy the presence of Mr. Eugene Shepherd. Would you agree?
Well, I don't enjoy the presence of most short people. And being that this was 1893, I can only assume he was maybe 5'2".
Again, you're freakishly tall, so I mean, it's just kind of up there. You're like on the low end of scary tall, so you don't like anybody that you have to look down to.
I mean, I look down on pretty much everybody, but yeah, you're right.
Except for the 2-time. So
never met him.
Really
haven't been in the right bathroom.
So we're going to leave that for you guys to kind of figure out. Now, if you're a video game fan, you probably already nailed that one. Now, again, we're going to go back to wood and ox leather. Now, I think one of the coolest things about this story is that I did a little bit more digging on, so he had taken this thing to basically county fairs around, and now Oneida County being the most talked about place that he had taken this thing. And now what he had done is he had created this basement-like atmosphere in a tent. So it was dark. It was a little dreary in there. Moist comes to mind. It was a little moist in there. I don't really know that that's for sure. It's just a really gross word to say. And if you can really kind of say it into the microphone, moist, you'll kind of you'll get as grossed out as I do when I say that word. But one of the things I like the best is that now his sons were party to this whole thing. Now, knowing for sure this thing was fake as shit, okay, and knowing it was a general hoax, we can kind of, I think, respect Eugene in a way, in the sense that, man, he must have pulled a real fast one on these people, having it move with the leather strings and using wood and ox leather. Now, I want to say that as a relatively intelligent human being, that I would have never fallen for this in a million years. But people did, and people were terrified, and people came from counties and counties around. And you're not talking about getting in your car. And I think the drive from where I live outside of Milwaukee to Oneida County is probably a 6-hour drive, maybe 4 hours, 5 hours. It's between 4 and 6. I didn't Google it. I should have Googled it before I just made that claim. But I would say between 4 to 6 hours of a drive. That's in a vehicle, approximately, and as I drive, 87 miles an hour minimum. I'm going to get there pretty quick. This is before all of that. People made an afternoon, days out of getting to this fair. You know, it was obviously, and county fairs now not being, you know, the semblance for redneckery is what I would like to call it. I mean, you really see just some of the lowest quality human beings sometimes at county fairs. But I believe that, you know, this is probably something that people really came around to see. Now, I wouldn't say scholared individuals, but everybody, you know, and people made the trek days, and especially when they had heard of this. Now, you have a guy like Eugene who's been to several county fairs, who's the rumor is out there that he has this creature that nobody's ever seen. And it's 1893, so there's no best friend Google out there to go, you know, this guy's full of total shit. And he's a trickster. He was selling moss perfume. What the hell is this guy talking about? You know, he's not out there doing that thing. So people came around, and not only did they come around to see this thing, they damn well believed it was real, sitting in that cage, and were terrified of what they were witnessing.
So this is where stories like this break down for me, and not just not just stories of the unexplained, but just almost like non-primary source breakdowns of people's reaction to things in 1893, or let's just say in centuries past. I think that it's very easy to assume that people were just dumbfounded by absolutely everything back then. My guess is that the vast majority of people came to see this thing, saw it was a joke, laughed, paid their money, got drunk, got food with their family, and went home. And maybe the lore that has been written about it will make the claim that people were flabbergasted and thought it was real. But to be honest, if people had seen deer or animal or any type of animal, and then they see this Muppet that this guy created,
very accurate description, yes.
You know, no reasonable human being, whether it be 1200, 1300, 1600, 1893, or 2019, is going to think that it's real. So I'm sure that those, and I shouldn't say I'm sure, in my opinion, I would venture to say that those claims of people being thoroughly convinced are thoroughly overblown, if anything.
I guess I can kind of see that. I can agree with you in that request. I mean, who knows? You know, who really knows what that situation looked like then? And you know, I think, again, we talked about how in the town of Rhinelander has romanticized this, and a lot of the places I went and looked have kind of romanticized the idea of this thing kind of being real. And obviously it is very much a hoax, very much a play on people's vulnerabilities and gullibilities, especially in a time where I think anything was really, really believable. And I mean, you're talking about at this point, when miles and thousands upon thousands of square miles of uncharted territory, with even in our country at the time, 1893. And you kind of think, okay, you know, there were plenty of people around, they would know better. But, you know, I think at the same time, I think there's plenty of credence, or, you know, plenty of thought that lends credence to the idea that, you know, you're up in northern Wisconsin. Your nearest neighbor might not be as close as you think. So, you know, there's plenty of things that kind of go bump in the night that you're not really ready for, you know.
Right, right. I mean that's true. I wouldn't sit here and argue that people would see this and not think that maybe there was something like it that existed. My argument is that I don't think that they would have seen this thing that he created thinking that it was the real thing. I mean, yeah, we take for granted these days the fact that, you know, most of, you know, I mean, Wisconsin is a very expansive state with a lot of nature, but most of it has been explored. The thing for me, especially with any, land faring animal, is that, you know, it's only a matter of time before something is seen. You know, not everywhere where these sightings happen is, the Pacific Northwest, where you literally have, thousands upon thousands of miles of lush, unexplained forest. There is a lot of wilderness in Wisconsin, but there's also a lot of people. Wisconsin has a lot of people. Wisconsin is a state of a incredibly high percentage of outdoorsmen, hunters, fishermen. A lot of people are in Wisconsin because either they themselves or their families for generations have been, patrons of the outdoors.
Yeah, so I would agree to that. I would agree that certainly, as we referred to earlier, the people up north really enjoy their outdoors times, right? So I would again, and not to just keep beating the same term down there, but does lend credence to the idea that this is probably very easily even noticed by most people in the area as legit and total bullshit. But props off to Mr. Eugene here. 10 cents a gander, like we said at the county fair, probably made him a fair buck.
He didn't have to give it back. He did it for the money.
There was no Better Business Bureau. Maybe perhaps there was. I wouldn't even want to say that, but perhaps not as strict as one we might find of today.
What the hell does the Better Business Bureau do even today, other than say this place got an A?
Yeah, I guess
have you ever seen a place with a B? Because if you have a B, you're not advertising it.
Is it? What's that? Is that the same road as a Michelin star?
Well, Michelin, no. Michelin is much more. What's the word I'm looking for? I think Michelin is much more well respected, especially in the culinary world. Okay. Restaurants being like a 1 Michelin star restaurant is a place where you're going to have to make reservations a long way out to go sit down. A 3-star Michelin star restaurant is a legendary restaurant that will go down in history. Like they're
now,
like,
do you know how many? What's the top star you can get in the Michelin rating?
3. And you have to maintain it. Once you have it, you can't keep it. You have to maintain it every year. So it's an incredible struggle even to get it, and then it's also an insane struggle to maintain it. And that's why a lot of these incredibly high-level chefs end up losing their mind, and a lot of them end up leaving the business and going on to doing TV or something like that. And that's really what the Michelin star thing does for you. I mean, if you're a executive chef at a restaurant that earns 3 Michelin stars, if you want to go and get a gig on TV, the world is your oyster at that point. No pun intended.
I always think of the tire and the Michelin Man.
It's the same company. You know that, right?
No, you're a liar.
I'm not.
Really?
Nope. It's the same company.
Well, you know what? If you've learned anything today from this podcast, I think that's the one. I think that's the one takeaway I'm going to take here. Michelin Man, Michelin star rating for restaurants, same company.
Yep.
Incredible. Well, let's jump back in real quick to the Hodag, and we're going to wrap this up. Certainly our point on the Hodag. Now, there are some truths, quote unquote, to the Hodag, which much to the chagrin of hoaxers and critics. Now, the Hodag might get its actual credit from an old but still technically mythological creature. God, I'm going to just butcher this. The Indian names in this state are incredibly difficult to pronounce. There are a lot of Indian nations and tribes that came out of this area in Minnesota and Michigan area, and not one of them decided to have their English name represented in a manner which most people could actually speak. So it is called the Mishu Pishu, or the Michi Pishu, I believe is how it is pronounced. And it was described as an underwater panther creature that is supposed to be one of the most important water creatures in native culture. Now, the Mishipishu translates to the Great Lynx. It was described as a creature with paws of a cat, but covered in scales, and much like the Hodag, has a telltale spike rounding down its back. Now, you know what I thought immediately when this was described to me?
What's that?
Is the dog dragon from the Neverending Story. That's like what I imagine this thing looks like, just like, you know what I mean? Which, by the way, it was literally well into my adulthood, and I shit you not, probably one of my favorite movies growing up. It took me well into my adulthood to realize that was supposed to be a dragon and not a dog. I just thought it was a dog. It looks exactly like a dog.
Is this similar to what you saw running down I-57?
If it wasn't 80 feet in nature and serpentine in manner, I guess you could probably give it that description. Cool. So no, not at all. Okay. So the creature is said to live in direct juxtaposition to the masters of air, as it was considered a master of the sea. Now, I did a little bit more research on kind of the masters of certain things. Now, this is loose research, so don't send me any hateful messages. But the certain tribes in the area and around the country, especially, and it's actually not specific to this area. This creature exists in several mythologies that run through ancient tribes and cultures, but they had kind of, I guess gods would be kind of the better for it, but they never kind of really refer to them as gods, and it was more like masters. Now, the master of the sky was considered the Thunderbird, which I am so excited that it was, because I think on a future episode for sure we can cover Thunderbirds and kind of great mythological encrypted beasts of the sky, pterosaurs included. Now, those are going to be some fun shit, and just probably much less talked about, I would think.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we got the, as you would put it earlier, the world is our oyster, and I think we can kind of cover whatever the hell we want. So now the Thunderbird, if you're not familiar, is a great winged creature. Obviously, is it a Chevy? Was it a Chevy Thunderbird? Or I think it was a Pontiac.
No, Pontiac Firebird.
Ford not to be confused with.
Is it a Ford Thunderbird?
There was a Thunderbird. I'm positive.
Oh, I know there was a Thunderbird. A Thunderbird is what? Burt Reynolds said movie.
No, that was a Firebird for sure.
That was a Firebird. Okay.
That was a Firebird. The ultimate of white trash vehicles, by the way.
I think it's a Ford Thunderbird.
I think you might be right. Now listen, and when we post this shit,
not a car guy. Not a car guy.
Yeah, me neither. I really should.
It is a Ford Thunderbird. It's a Ford Thunderbird.
Ford Thunderbird. You know what? I'm actually seeing what the Thunderbird looks like in my head, and they did a recreation of the Thunderbird, if I'm not mistaken, in the early to mid 2000s, and it was hideous. It was a hideous vehicle.
Yeah, a lot of things were hideous in the early to mid.
Oh God, yeah, they just
not as much so as the 90s. Also, actually, you know what? No, the worst.
Well, the 90s is really when they start transitioning into more aerodynamic looking vehicles rather than the boxiness of the 80s.
Yes, the worst era for cars, just period, was 1978 to 1997.
Is that when you looked like you were literally driving a tissue box down the road?
Yes, we're literally, for 15 years, it seems like they fired every designer that worked at any car company.
And they literally forgot the idea of aerodynamic possibilities.
Yeah. So I mean, just horrific.
Straight on.
Horrific.
Yeah, I guess I can't disagree with that. I couldn't name a single car between that time period.
Well, just think about like a Corolla, a Corolla or a Camry or anything like that. I mean, think about my Ford Tempo. That was from that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that was your sister's car originally, wasn't it?
No, that was my car. My sister's car originally was the Infiniti G20, which was also an incredibly ugly car. Now, with that being said, there were the exceptions. My baby blue Cadillac DeVille was 1994. To this day, that car is beautiful.
God.
But not.
We talked about that's the second reference to the baby blue Cadillac. I can't tell you if you guys understand this, but we loved that fucking car.
Oh, we absolutely love that car. But that car, that's the exception to the rule. There were exceptions to the rule.
There's a sad demise to that vehicle too.
The vast majority of cars in that era were truly horrific.
Definitely.
I mean,
I think if you put a picture of any one of those cars in front of me at this point, I'd be like, God, that is ugly as sin.
If you could turn burnt toast into a shape, That's what cars look like in 15 years.
Well said. I think it's well said. Now, it is said that the Machu Picchu lived in the deepest part of lakes and rivers and were able to cause massive storms. Now, they would basically blame any kind of modern day thunderstorm, was a hurricane, but certainly not in Wisconsin, but tornado-like weather on this creature, saying that it was deeply aggravated by the current state of certain tribes, all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of really see where lore fits in. Anything unexplained, was definitely blamed on godlike creatures. And there was also supposed to be guardians of massive copper deposits that were found in the Great Lakes region. Now, did you know that there were massive copper deposits that were found in this area?
I was aware of copper mines.
Yes, and they were actually heavily mined hundreds of years before European settlers got here, and in ways that are literally unexplained to this day. Again, maybe a future episode, but we don't.
Maybe a future episode. I mean, not everything has to be about the. Well, I guess that is unexplained, so that fits the bill. It doesn't have to be cryptid,
and certainly everything doesn't have to be a future episode. We can just never talk about it again.
Oh, of course, but we'll talk about how we will talk about it, and then just
absolutely. I mean, if it's on the docket, you know what I'm saying, we'll put it in there.
Yeah.
All right, my man. Well, we're staring down the barrel of an hour and a half podcast, so I think we might have to break this up into 3 parts if you're interested in that. I think this might be.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be 3 parts. Can be 2 parts. Maybe
can be 2 parts for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
we don't necessarily need to cover anything. We can cover serial killers as a generality and cover all that, or Satanism and the occult as a generality. It doesn't necessarily have to be Wisconsin based. But I mean, I would certainly say that the Hodag was quite the bit of conversation. I didn't think we were going to get through this much time frame on this.
Well, I think the Hodag was important for one reason. It was really the beginning of the kind of inspired mindset of Wisconsin Knights, and it definitely lends to a lot of the maybe perceived weirdness of the state. Wisconsin has many things. Wisconsin has thousands upon thousands of beautiful lakes, beautiful forests. It is a state that, we talk about in the context of this show as being weird, but Wisconsin is a beautiful place. I've been traveling there my entire life. I love
Wisconsin. Also very beautiful.
Yeah. Very, very nice, very friendly, very welcoming. There's excellent food. There's excellent cities. There's tons to do. It's a wonderful place. But the Hodag probably was responsible for, I think, the what Wisconsinites and the people in charge of the history of the state would readily accept as, some of the quirkiness of Wisconsin. And I think that they embrace that, and I think the state is better off for it.
I agree. I would have to agree 1,000%. I think it's a very fun piece of, and now Seth doesn't live in Wisconsin, but that does not infer that he is not familiar with this area. I know that he has had family from this area, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, my mom lives in southern Wisconsin, and
that's fair. That's fair.
I get on the highway. I drive north, and I'm in Wisconsin in 40 minutes. So
you're always familiar with your surrounding states. You know what I mean? You're always, especially if you have any kind of adventure.
I've spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. I grew up. My grandpa lived in Wisconsin, in central Wisconsin.
That's kind of more what I was getting at.
I've spent a ton of time in Wisconsin.
And I currently reside first 10 to 15 years of my life. Now these last, I would say, close to 7 years of my life have been in this state, and I've kind of gone out of my way to do what I can to respect the state and kind of figure out what it's kind of all about. And I really think one of the more fascinating parts of this is that Wisconsin, by and large, as far as the 50 states in this country, is considered to be one of the most quote unquote paranormal states. Now we have this comes from a massive, I think it comes kind of from a massive Indian population, a very diverse Indian population. We have had very famous, and we had talked about at the beginning of the broadcast here, what you would call, I don't think Ed Gein is technically a serial killer because I only think he killed 2 people that they know of, but you have Jeffrey Dahmer. We do have Satanism and the occult, which was very popular here in the 80s and was popular everywhere in the 80s and 90s. But for some reason, they took a very bizarre hold up here in the Dairyland. So
Making a Murderer, isn't the Netflix show Making a Murderer?
Yes, absolutely. Just outside of Sheboygan, and a very interesting story. Now, I'm not too versed on that. I would definitely be interested in covering that. I've never watched that documentary. It was very popular, a few years ago on Netflix.
Yes, I also did not watch it. I cannot stand watching documentaries that outline the failure of our justice system. So
which now you will find in any serial killer case, whether it's BTK, whether it's John Wayne Gacy, whether it's the Boston Strangler, whether it's the Hillside Stranglers. You could literally name anyone, and it is complete and utter incompetence by most of the justice system and the police force. And that is in no disregard or hate towards what the current police force is. But I mean, I think they weren't dealing. You understand, in the 70s and 80s, people didn't literally understand that one person could kill several people. They just figured that most killings were passion crimes and stuff like that. But I mean, as you will find out, you and I, as we kind of delve deeper into some of this stuff, is there is just gross incompetence in law enforcement. I am totally with you on that.
Investigation, was still in its infancy, even in the 60s and 70s. Actually, even in the more so in the 70s, because great show on Netflix called Mindhunters.
Phenomenal show. My wife is very familiar with the show. I've only seen snippets of the episodes, but I really did enjoy the parts that I did watch.
Yeah, and basically it follows the, it's a retelling of two FBI agents that really were the first to delve into psychological screenings and looking into psychological tendencies of these people who were killing multiple people, because as Justin just spoke about, law enforcement at the time didn't think that there was such thing as a crime without a motive. They didn't think it existed.
Absolutely.
As insane as that sounds.
Absolutely. I mean, 30, 40 years later, it's such a no-brainer for us to think about. It's like, well, of course,
right, like someone's just going to go crazy and just going to kill somebody. But
absolutely.
Back then, they didn't know that. They thought, of course, if someone was being killed, someone was mad at them.
Yes, always some type of crime of passion in some way.
Right. So very interesting. Highly recommended.
And I think
Mindhunters on Netflix, and season 2 is coming out shortly.
Ooh. I'm going to have to brush up. I think that would be such a great topic for us to cover, is maybe even kind of broad scoping, that kind of thing would be really fun. So yeah, hell yeah, man. What do you think? That would be fun. Yeah. Like I said, I think one of the things we really want to focus on too, before we kind of really wrap this up, is that as much as our title kind of really describes us as Decryptid, we're really open to whatever you got on the table, and kind of whatever you, or we rather, can think of, or kind of throw at the wall here and kind of see what sticks. And that really goes for anything. I think we've talked about this before, kind of off air, really covering cult activities, whether it be Children of God, whether it be Aum Shinrikyo, whether it be the Branch Davidians, Jonestown, all that kind of stuff. And we'll get we're going to try to keep it entertaining, but there will be some heavier parts to this, I would guess. But I'm thrilled that if you, after an hour and 28 minutes officially in 5 seconds, are still around listening to this, that you had some fun with us today. And I really think there's a lot of really great things to come from this podcast.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, sure, there will probably be times where, we're talking about pretty serious things and it gets pretty dark. There are going to be times where we're talking about completely lighthearted stuff. I would love to discuss the pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates, who in the 70s threw a no-hitter on acid.
Oh my God, absolutely.
Let's talk about that guy.
Absolutely. God, that could be episode 3. Yeah, absolutely.
Justin and I, we're not creeps. We don't walk around our homes illuminated by candlelight. Like I said, we just like talking about that stuff because it's fun. So if there's a topic that one week we want to talk about that might not totally fit the theme of the show, it's our show. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah, I would agree. And please, and just kind of bear with us. If it's not something you're into, maybe just skip the episode. But I can assure you that the two of us, having known each other for the length of time they do, and having the relationship that you and I do, I feel like at the very least, if you're not interested in the content, you're going to be interested in just hearing us kind of give us our back and forth.
Yeah, hopefully people are.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that's episode 1 in the books, my man. What do you think?
Sounds good to me. It's a work day, and I think we covered all our bases. I know all I've ever wanted to know about the Hodag.
I think we can all agree that we never have to talk about the Hodag on this show ever again.
Yeah, let's forget about him.
Let's do that. Okay, you guys, thank you very much once again for listening to the Decryptid Podcast. I really hope that, I think that's the name we're going to stick with here. Now, do apologize if it does change in the future, but I think we have a strong basis to kind of go with it. I really do enjoy that name.
The only reason it would ever change in the future is if for some reason we find out that we're not allowed to use it because someone else might be using it. But we did our research. We think it's free and clear.
Yeah.
There was a different name before that was not free and clear. So we had to do a hot swap. Yeah. But looks like Decryptid's going to be.
If you listen to this and you think you're going to get in on the ground floor and try to take this from you can go fuck yourself. Okay. Listen, just take care of it. So let's do a little shout out. So let's talk about. Yeah, just get your own shit. All right, get your own tag in life. So let's. You can follow us at Decryptid Podcast. That is going to be in the title. Decryptid CRYPTID Podcast at Twitter. Did you get the setup Facebook or Instagram yet?
Well, no, because at the time we didn't know what the name of our podcast was going to be. But there will be an Instagram page. It will be something along the lines of Decryptid Podcast. There will be a Facebook page where we will share articles, pictures. Anyone that likes or follows that page will be able to upload their own stuff. So we'll build a community there. We will probably end up building a subreddit. So we're going to build a social media community around this. So. If we are fortunate enough to get any listeners to this that want to come back and keep on listening to us, we want to give them outlets to interact with each other, share their stories. So there will be no shortage of that. So
and not only interact with each other, but definitely interact with us. I think you and I have a very good social media prowess. Me more so on Twitter than kind of anything else, and I think we had kind of lightly discussed maybe you hanging out on the Instagram page, but. You guys make sure that if you have enjoyed this and like this, make sure to just do whatever you can to give us the promotion. I hate to be the guy who's kind of out there searching for or begging for likes and retweets and all that stuff. But, just make sure that, and as with anything, that if you enjoy it, make sure you show your support.
Yeah. If you like it and you think your friends will like it, tell your friends.
All right, cool. You guys, that's going to wrap it up for us today. My name again is Justin. This is Seth sitting on the other side of the state line. You just got done listening to the very first, very official, maybe very unofficial, currently Decryptid Podcast.
Who knows? We might just make it live.
Wait, you know what? Why don't you shout out? You have another Instagram shout out. Why don't you give that? Why don't you tell them?
Yeah, sure. Seeing how the first episode was on the Wisconsin the Weird, I think it was called. Well, Wisconsin being a great state. If you are an outdoor enthusiast or a fisherman, I am myself a very passionate fisherman / angler. And I have an Instagram page called Angling United, ANGLINGUNITED, where followers of that Instagram page send me pictures. I post pictures of fish. I post pictures of my own fish. If any of you guys ever have any questions about fishing, feel free to email the show, reach out to me on Instagram. And so that's my other big passion. I wouldn't even call talking about the weird my passion. It's something that I enjoy doing. Fishing is my real passion. So if you guys are interested in that, feel free to reach out.
Definitely. You guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Anything else you want to say?
I don't think so.
I think
until next time.
Until next time. Ooh, what a great finish. All right, y'all. Until next time, we'll catch you later. Thank you.